Hey my good friends, Sam Haymart with Test Driven TV. We're out here in the desert on a kind of blustery day just outside of Phoenix, and we are test driving the 2023 Ford Maverick Tremor. A perfect day for it out here in the muddy desert. So I'm going to show it to you inside and out. We're going to take it for a drive both on and off road, and then I'm going to tell you what I really think. All right, my friends, before we get out on the test drive, at least on screen, you can tell I've already been driving it. This thing is looking very much at home out here in the muddy Sonoran desert. Having a look at what we're testing here today, this is an XLT trim grade Tremor. And when you get the Tremor, you automatically get all-wheel drive, you automatically get the advanced all-wheel drive, and you automatically get the EcoBoost 4-cylinder turbo. It's the only way it comes. And as tested, this one has a lot of options on it on top of the Tremor, and we're at $34,795. The first visual you can see that sort of gets us to that price tag is this has the Tremor Appearance Group, which is a painted roof, carbonized gray. I think it goes pretty nicely with this overall color of Avalanche Gray, which is a unique color just for the Tremor. And the package also gives you graphics down on the lower rockers and graphics on the hood. But let's talk about what you get when you just get a base Tremor in terms of visuals. Orange accents everywhere. Look at the grille. Orange accents on the grille, blacked out headlights, and a blacked out Ford emblem there on the front. And looking at the lower bumper, this has a unique lower bumper fascia. It's angled so that you don't drag that thing nearly as easily. And that's helpful because I have dragged the FX4 bumper out here in the same location, just doing some mild off-roading. Very easy to do. So that's a nice thing that helps the approach angle at the front. Down there, you'll also see orange tow hooks, and you'll see underneath, this has an aluminum skid plate, which helps protect that engine and transmission from getting dragged across things. As you can see, just looking at it, a little bit of a suspension lift. It's 1 inch taller at the front and about a ½ inch taller at the back. So ground clearance is increased. Coming to the back, you can see this has a full-size spare tire standard. This has a trailer hitch receiver standard. Wheels on this, 17-inch unique wheel for the Tremor. This has a little orange pocket right there where the valve stem is. And 235/65/17 Falcon Wild Peak tires. And a pretty nice tire they are. So far out here in the mud, they've been doing me well today. The interior of the Maverick Tremor is a place that looks identical to that of the base XL model, which we happen to own as a long-term tester. The colors are the same, the trims are the same, navy pier for all of the plastics, and then you have gray and black trims. Now, the big difference here in the Tremor from the standard XL is the fact that the Tremor has unique seat trims. It is what Ford calls black onyx cloth. It's really sort of a black denim. I kind of like it. It's a sturdy looking, handsome looking cloth, and then it does have orange stitching and a little bit of dark black trim around the sides and edges. And if you step up into the lariat, it's actually ActiveX, which is vinyl. It looks like leather, but there it is full black with the orange stitching. Even in the lariat, though, all of the other plastics and trims on this interior are identical to that of the XL. One difference is this lid right here is actually black, where in the XL it is blue. On the door panels, the armrest is a blue vinyl instead of a black cloth. Another item that comes with the Tremor are these rubber all-weather floor trays. These are great, especially on a day like today where I am getting in and out of this thing with muddy boots, so you'll have to forgive that they look a little bit lived in. When I sit here in these seats, I've got the same seats that you're going to find in any other Maverick. One of the things that I've talked about before in other Maverick reviews is that they are comfortable to the extent that their firmness and their supportiveness is good, but they don't have a lot of adjustment range. There's a height adjustment and there's a fore and aft and recline, but the height adjustment, for instance, isn't up and down. It's hinged on the front and it goes like this. And so if you don't like having this big thing underneath your legs here to reach the pedals, it takes a little bit of adjusting to get used to. But as I sit here and look forward, one of the other big changes that you get with the Tremor is the deluxe instrument cluster that you're going to find either in the Lariat or in the FX4 with the all-wheel drive. It has a larger cluster with a digital information screen in the front, because you have all of the screens that go along with the drive modes and some of the other features with the all-wheel drive system. And that is pretty slick. Much nicer looking unit. What I don't care for so much right here is this plastic steering wheel. In our $20,000 XL, it's okay, but now we're at $35,000 almost, and it really feels like we should have something a little nicer here. And there's quality issues, like there's molding marks that you can feel in it. And there's one right on the back of the steering wheel. I can feel it with my hand every time I rest my hand here. It's a big piece of extra plastic that's there, and that's there on my XL as well. Again, something I overlook at $20,000. We're getting into the mid-30s. These things start to become out of place. Center stack is the 8-inch infotainment screen with a little cubby off to the side, which always gets curious looks from people. Controls for that, vents, and then down below that, the HVAC system controls. And here we have a climate control. That's a manual climate control is how it's listed, and very easy to use and simple. And then down below that, USB ports, 12-volt port here, and then the center console. A lot of versatility going on in here. Console has a lot of storage in there, quite a bit bigger than a square tissue box. And lower console, there's a nice place for your phone. You can stand it up and look. If you go up into the higher trim grade, there's a wireless charger down there. Center console has cup holders off to the side and places for big, tall gas station cups. The gear selector here is, of course, the dial gear. Don't like that. I don't like it in our own vehicle. Haven't gotten used to it. Still prefer a lever. Exclusive to the Tremor behind this is this control panel for all of the all-wheel drive and drive modes. It says Tremor right here in orange lettering. Pressing that button will cycle through all of the various drive modes. The button for the four-wheel drive lock is here, and then next to it, the button for the rear differential lock, which is a pretty nice little feature. The rear seat of the Maverick is a pretty compact place. It's a compact truck after all, but believe it or not, this is actually a little bit more comfortable than I have found in trucks like the Toyota Tacoma, for instance. And what I can tell you about this is that these seats here are set for my height, about 5'9" with my boots on. I've got about 2 inches of legroom here, and there's a bit of an indentation on the back of this seat, so it really isn't too bad. The seating height is really good though. Look at this. It's a very natural position, and these seats are a little bit dish, so I'm sitting down in them. So this is actually pretty comfortable back here. And because we're in the XLT, this does have the amenity of the fold-down armrest, something the XL doesn't have. If you're looking at a Tremor, the XLT and the Lariat will definitely have this. Looking at the rear of the center console though, this is where I start seeing missing things. There is a 12-volt port here and a fits slot to put accessories in, but back here there are no AC vents. Again, recurring theme, something that might be okay in a $20,000 base model, but when we start getting up into the mid-30s, it's missing. Air vents are missing back here, especially here in Arizona when it does actually get hot, not wintry like today. Now, this seat does fold upward and does have storage underneath. Pretty good storage bins down there. A lot of people do complain about the fact that this is a one-piece seat that folds up. It doesn't have a split of any kind. Nonetheless, it does have a good level of storage down there. When it comes to rating this interior, I've generally liked it before, and I find it very familiar now that we have one that we test drive every day. What I will tell you though is that in spite of its roominess and all of its versatility, the materials in here are pretty cheap. There are hard plastics everywhere, your hand roam, and that's okay in a $20,000 truck. And we've talked about this before, but now that we're getting up into the mid-30s and you start looking at all the other things you can buy in this price range, some of it becomes out of place. So overall, this interior gets 4 out of 5 stars. Now we've got to talk about the infotainment system here, which we've talked about in other Maverick reviews, and the story hasn't changed. We have a basic radio here, 8-inch touchscreen. That's a good thing. AM, FM. It has Bluetooth connectivity so that you can stream audio to it and connect your phone to it and have all of the voice-activated controls and features through that. Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, but it is wired. Beyond that, not a lot of feature content. It does have speakers. It does have audio sound. It is not the worst audio sound in the world, not the best. The menus are very simple and easy to understand. Going around and changing stations, changing settings, that sort of thing is quite easy, and the graphics look good and they're easy to see in various light sources. Now, when you get into nighttime and you turn the lights on, it reverses, it becomes dark. And so that part they've done well. The problem with this system is it just doesn't seem to have enough back-end computing power to support for all of the features that it has. If you try to use Bluetooth, Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, it tends to be very slow and clunky. It freezes up quite a bit. I have found in all of our testing with various trucks that the Bluetooth is spotty. It's on, it's off. It doesn't always keep a connection. And so it's low-end electronics at the back. I call it a clock radio. And if you picture a clock radio sitting in your nightstand, those old things from the 70s, that is what this is the automotive equivalent for. It's okay in a $20,000 XL base model, but in a $35,000 vehicle like this, it's trash. It just is. I hate to put it like that, but it's trash. When you look at everything else that you find in the competition at this price, even other Fords, this just doesn't belong here at this price. This infotainment system gets 2 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, we're going to go for a little drive here in the mud and do a little bit of trail riding and experience this off-road system. This has a number of drive modes, an expanded array of drive modes, so we'll start right there. There's normal, there's tow haul, slippery, mud and ruts, sand, and back to normal. So here we're not actually dealing with deep mud and ruts, so I'm just going to set it for slippery. The big claim to fame with the Tremor is the advanced all-wheel drive system. And why does that matter? Well, it matters because the standard all-wheel drive Maverick comes with an all-wheel drive system that's really something that you would find in a car, right? You don't have the ability to force it to be all-wheel drive. You don't have any kind of locking capability, and it really doesn't have that many advanced features when it comes to really controlling the traction and sending the power around. This system allows you to press a button down here on the center console and actually force it to be all-wheel drive. That sends about 50% of the power to the rear axle, and the system is pretty advanced with clutches in the rear drive unit. It can actually send up to 100% of the power going to the rear axle to one of the 2 wheels. So if you've got a lot of slippage going on, it can push all the power that's going to the rear axle to one of those wheels. The front axle has 50-50 open differential, but it does have brake actuated traction control that can clamp down on the wheel spinning and push it to the other side. In all, depending on your drive mode, this can send up to 70% of the power to that rear axle, but it typically is 50-50. And on the dash here, there is a screen you can go to that shows you what the actual power balance is. Now, one of the benefits to this extra added ground clearance is that in spots like this where, oh, got a rear wheel off the ground, where you have a lot of moguls and you need articulation, this does give you more ground clearance in those places to not be scraping this thing up on the bottom. One of the things that I mentioned about articulation and going over moguls and whatnot, because this does have greater ground clearance, it's better for that. But I will point out that because we still have sort of a street-tuned suspension and we are in a unibody vehicle, this isn't a body-on-frame truck. This doesn't have a lot of articulation going on. It still has pretty good roll stiffness for on-road driving, which we'll talk about in a moment. So you do tend to lift a wheel here and there, and it doesn't have a lot of articulation when you get into spots that require it. So that's one of the reasons why that traction control in these drive modes are really important, because they will arrest the spin on a wheel that might be hanging in the air. And the fact that you can press that button down here and force all-wheel drive is a big deal, because you just can't do that with the standard all-wheel drive system in the Maverick, and that's important. Now we're going to transition to the desert washboard road, which is wet today. So I don't know how washboardy it's going to be, but I do love to test trucks and SUVs out here on this pretty manicured surface, but washboarded nonetheless. And it really goes a long way to give me a bead on how well tuned the chassis is and the suspension. Can it really feel of quality and feel solid out here when you take it off the pavement? And just like the regular Maverick two-wheel drive and the FX4 EcoBoost that I've tested out here, it feels pretty good for a unibody truck. And that was always my biggest worry when Ford first unveiled this was, oh my gosh, it's a truck, it's off-road. What's that going to feel like in the rough stuff? Is it going to feel like a POS? And the truth is it just doesn't. Yes, there is the Maverick rattle in the dash that almost all of them have, but it isn't that bad yet. It doesn't have any miles on it. But as far as the structure is concerned, it feels solid. As far as the suspension feels, I'm not getting any rattling or anything out of the suspension that tells me it's anything less than well bolted together. I can feel that this all-wheel drive system is really pushing power around, and I'm looking at the readout on the dash, and it's pretty helpful to see what's going on. Whew, there was a little splash for you guys. Anyway, this is all fun and games, but the reality is how this drives on the pavement is going to be every bit as important to most customers as to how it drives off. On the pavement, this is a vehicle that has the same feel, the same handling, and the same characteristics that I have found with other Mavericks that I've tested. It has a suspension that is firm, it has good roll stiffness, and it's pretty quiet on the road. Even with these all-terrain tires, I haven't noticed a higher level of noise coming from them, especially on the highway. So the decibel reading for a highway 70-mile-an-hour test is actually the same as it is in the all-wheel drive FX4 we tested last year. And so I haven't found that there's any kind of a deficit in terms of handling, ride, and driving characteristics because we have the higher ride height and this off-road suspension. Around town, it actually feels quite sporting when you throw it into a corner going maybe at a left turn at a intersection, or even on a windy back road. This has some good sporting feel to it, and it's very stable on the highway. They did keep the tuning of the suspension really dialed in for on-road driving, though it does manage to not beat you to death off-road. It's actually a good compromise, I think. So I'm happy with what they've done here overall when it comes to the chassis. This chassis gets 5 out of 5 stars. Now it's time to talk about what's under the hood, because we haven't quite got there yet. So if you watch my videos, you know the question I always like to ask is, how does it go? A little slow off the line, but it finally gets going once it goes and grabs, and 60. So power's pretty good. Under the hood is a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, EcoBoost as Ford calls it, 250 horsepower, 277 pound-feet of torque. And here it comes mated to an 8-speed automatic transmission, and with it, all-wheel drive, the advanced all-wheel drive system as such. Now, power's pretty good, and this transmission does a pretty good job of kicking off the shifts, and that's what we said when we test drove the last EcoBoost. And it has a number of things to help it save fuel, and one of those is the auto start-stop function. So when I come up to a stop sign such as here, the engine shuts off, I let off the gas, starts up again, and off we go. Not my favorite feature here, of course. Never have liked it, never will. It does have an off switch right here on the dash. Getting to the traction, because we're in the Tremor, we've got semi-wet pavement out here, and I actually had this in front-wheel drive for my full acceleration. And the reason I did that is because without the 4-wheel drive lock, this still will give you all-wheel drive traction. It's just automatic. It's just when the computer determines that traction is needed at the back axle, then and only then will it send power, and when you drive aggressively. So with the power meter here, if I mash the pedal, I can see it pushing some power to the rear axle, and that's part of its programming. So while it does default to front wheel drive, you are getting an all-wheel drive effect when it's needed, even when you don't have the 4-wheel drive lock on. Now, fuel economy, that's really where the conversation has to be had. This is rated at 20 city, 24 highway, and 21 mpg combined. That is actually 3 mpg less than the standard all-wheel drive Maverick, and that goes to a number of things. It has a higher ride height, it's got different aerodynamics, and it has more weight because of the extra all-wheel drive system, and there's a little bit more drag figured into the mix with these all-terrain tires. 3 mpg you lose overall. Now, in my week with it, I didn't quite get to the 21 average. I got to about 20, which is about what I expected. And it's worth noting that with our long-term test hybrid Maverick, it's exactly half. It's exactly half of what we get every day with that vehicle in the same routine driving. But alas, you know, you do have a powerful turbo engine, you do have an all-wheel drive system, and it is expected that you lose some MPG when you upgrade your off-road capability. So rating this powertrain, I give it 4 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, it's raining on me here, so I'm going to try to wrap this up real quick and concise. I always like to talk about value here at the end of our test drives, and I own one of these. I have a XL hybrid, so I have a more or less expensive base model, which we've done a lot of reviews on. We've done a lot of reviews on pretty much every other model of the Maverick out there. And so here we are in the mid-30s with a more expensive version. And I tend to look at things different as that price goes up. And so when I start talking about value here, I'm looking at things like the interior, which is fine in a $20,000 truck, but the same interior in a $35,000 truck, I start going, not sure about some of these materials. The radio, the infotainment system, fine in a $20,000 truck, not okay in a $35,000 truck. Now, when it gets to powertrain, off-road capability, all of that, it's hard to beat, especially in this price range. So there's a lot of things here that are pluses and minuses when I start thinking about value. Warranty, not the best in the business. You can get into Hyundai with the Santa Cruz and you go up to 100,000 miles powertrain. Here we're at 560, 336 bumper to bumper, average for American brands. But overall, when I look at value at this price, I put that at 4 out of 5 stars. When you put that in with everything we've already talked about, we're at 4 out of 5 stars for the review. And that's pretty much in keeping with most of our Maverick reviews that we've done on all of the models. So there you go. And of course, it goes on our buy it list. It's been on our buy it list for quite some time because while it's not perfect, it offers a lot for the money, and really, there's not very many other options in this category. So I still think it remains one of the best options if you can get your hands on one. There you go. If you like what we do, see all of our stuff down there on social media. We do a lot of stuff there that we don't always have videos on, but you can see our Maverick playlist right there, and we've reviewed every other Maverick model. We've done tech, we've done mods. There's a lot of stuff there, over 60 videos. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel right down there and stay informed of when the next test drive comes. It's freaking raining, man.